let's make a start. I realised last week I completely ran out of time. And these groups here today, well, every alternate Monday, are what I call Yogic Alchemy. And there are two processes, really, one could say, in terms of spiritual understanding or spiritual enlightenment. One is an alchemical process, and the other is a metaphysical or an understanding process. So, really, we've had a lot of what we will call the metaphysical understanding. I ran a series of talks downstairs in the cafe at the tail end of last year, November and December, called Spiritual Incarnation. And quite a few of the guys came along to those talks. There were 3 of them. That was the talks to do with the nature of reality, our birth, or our appearance on the stage of reality, and then the last talk in that series was all to do with death, in terms of how we exit and where we go. Actually, just a quick show of hands. How many people came to those 3 here? 2, yes, we've got 1, 2, about half the audience. Yeah, okay.
Came in at the deep end.
You came at the last one,
At
did
the
you?
deep end, I came in. No, I missed all 3 of them.
Oh, you missed all 3, okay. All right. So it might be time maybe at some point to do those 3 again, but I'm not planning to do that just yet. I'm planning a new series of talks, I was just saying to Ashley a little while ago, for next month. The first one's to do with time, and ancient time particularly, and what the ancients knew or the ancients looked upon as time. We've touched upon that briefly last week, if you remember, when we were talking about the ancient cycle of the ages being like seasons, rather than just this linear idea of time that we have here in the West, which describes a straight line from past to present to future. So the ancients didn't really view time like that at all. They saw it as a cyclical event. And we are, right now, as a planet, at some point in this cycle, at some important point actually, in a transition part of this cycle right now, moving from a dark age into an age of energy, as the ancients called the Kali Yuga to the Dwapara Yuga. Has everybody here heard of the Kali Yuga? Yeah, we've heard it. The age of darkness, the age of ignorance. It's been hanging over us now for around about, 2,400 years, you think, Ashley? Approximately.
It's been quite a while, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been quite a while, yeah. A little too long. Yeah, it's actually the shortest season, or the shortest age. But at this juncture we experience 2 Kali Yugas together. There is a descending side to time and there's an ascending side. So right at the base of this cycle we have the descending Kali Yuga, which is then dovetailed and then meets the ascending Kali Yuga. So we actually have 2 dark ages, as it were, coalescing upon us, each 1,200 years, making a totality of 2,400. We are at the end of that now, more or less. More or less. Yeah, yeah. So that was characterized really by ignorance and really by a consciousness which regarded matter as the absolute truth, as the absolute reality. And really you could say as a planet we weren't able to see in our societies, within our religions, within our cultures, within our philosophies, much beyond matter. There were select groups that had privy to the inner information from previous ages where man was more enlightened, and they held on to that information, you might say, very tightly and very secretly. And really this is what we would regard now as the secret societies in this present time, because some of them actually still persist, but many of them have died off. So a big point of what I was trying to do really with this information and this knowledge was to bring forward what was held, you might say, within secret. Within those societies, behind closed doors, monasteries, temples, ashrams. I mean, you had to be one of the privileged few to have privy to this information going back, the last 2,000 odd years really. For the ordinary person on the street, probably would never come across this in the course of an entire life. So, thankfully, in some respects, I feel thankful anyway when I look back upon my life. When I was very young, for those that don't know me, I entered into an ashram environment when I was 18. And I studied this information for roughly about 8 years. Studied and practiced it. So we had a lot of practice in the ashram, usually about 5 to 6 hours of meditation and worship every single day. And you couldn't do anything unless you'd gone to what we would call the morning program or the morning meditations. It started very early, you could imagine. We started at 4 o'clock in the morning and we finished around about 9 or so. And that was every day, including Sundays. There was no days off. And a part of that is what we had was a class. A class would usually go on for an hour, but quite often if it was a good speaker or someone that really knew his stuff, he would go on for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours, quite easily. So we'd really get into this side of things. And as I was describing a few minutes ago, there are 2 aspects, 2 parts to spiritual or transcendental awakening. One's called the alchemical path, and the other is what you call the metaphysical path. The metaphysical path is the understanding, the mind, our intellect or rationale. It's a little bit like what I'm doing here now, is giving the understanding to the mind. And then we have the alchemical processes. The alchemical processes are more to do with energy processes. And this is the age that we're moving into now, the Dwapara age, which is going to be defined really through the use and the manipulation of energy. And this is the energy that is behind the gross physical matter. Yeah, this is the energy behind that. And you can see this is coming through now in the healing arts. And
can the collective consciousness bring it on more rapidly? Or
it can.
is that
It can.
just an ordained frame of time that's going to happen regardless?
Well, some would say that, yeah, this is an ordained frame of time. Like, spring has a certain duration, as does summer, autumn and winter. And there's nothing really as humans we can do to change that. But there's another philosophy, which is more the one I subscribe to, that these are actually defined by collective states of consciousness. And it's only because we've been locked into this, you might call, age of darkness or this ignorant time for so long that we think that now that this is the norm.
Yeah.
But actually this can change at any time. So we can move into a higher state of consciousness either individually or collectively. But mankind at the moment really, I wouldn't say is making much of an effort in that direction. We seem to be hell-bent this day and age on individualism, on consumerism, on gratification really of the ego, senses and the mind. Which is the total antithesis of what the ancients were recommending. It's the total opposite to what I learnt in the temple. I mean, you had to be really a rebel to go into the ashram because you had to stand against consumerism. You had to stand against your own senses and even your own mind in terms of not really trusting this to really inform you accurately as to what the nature of reality and truth actually is. Because most of us think that we can discern this, through a process of perhaps learning or deduction. And yet we were taught very early on that is completely fallacious. It's completely wrong. And that our senses, because they are imperfect, can never inform us accurately as to the truth of reality. And there's a requirement there in terms of going deeper into the nature of reality with consciousness, not using consciousness projected through the senses. But consciousness can directly perceive its own truth. It's like its own inner self can be perceived from the self. The self sees the self. We understand the self. We know the self inside of us. We all do. I would call this inner knowing. The Greeks called this gnosis. We're all familiar with this term gnosis. It means to know thyself. And for the most part, most of us obscurate. We actually put aside our gnosis. We put aside our inner truth, our inner knowing, which the intuition is a channel for, in favour of belief, in favour of a teaching, in favour of following a guru or some instruction or, part of a group or a society that then seeks to teach us this, what we already effectively know on the inside. So our gnosis has been obscurated by belief, and now we just follow belief. I always get this. When I talk to my family particularly, it's like, oh, that's just your belief. I say, well, it's not my belief. This is what I know to be true. Oh, that's just your belief. No, it's not. It's what I know to be true. It's like having a belief about grass is green and the sky is blue. That's not a belief, is it? you can perceive that directly. Grass is green, sky is blue. There's no belief around that. So it's the same on the inside. We know perfectly well our truth, except in a way, we've bent ourselves out of shape. We've allowed ourselves, as it were, to be pulled by our rationale, our powerful minds and our intellects, completely over, you might say, into the left field. This is my little diagram here as to what this is really about. And we live predominantly here in the Western world in what you might call a left brain schism. Apart from one or two here. Mary, you're not. I don't think you're more right brain. And we'll get to that. It's equally a pitfall as the left. But generally speaking, you could see the left really is the masculine side of our psyche. The right side of our brain is what we would say would be the feminine side. But in the West, we are predominantly ruled by the left, masculine, thinking, logical, rational side. When this side of our brain becomes too dominant, this left cortex, we then default neurologically to what's called the R complex. This is the reptilian brain. That then holds the executive command. That then gives the direction and the instruction neurologically as to how we're going to navigate through our life. And what the reptilian brain is all about is just basic survival. So when we become too left brain dominant, we become orientated towards survival consciousness, pure and simple. And our concerns really are just for ourselves, for our improvement in terms of our worldly lot, how we can get our needs met in terms of our physical existence, at the cost of whatever, even at the cost of other people, at the cost of causing pain and suffering, and at the cost of even destroying the world and the planet upon which we live and breathe and walk and have our existence. It doesn't matter. As far as the left brain is concerned, its executive command is defaulted to the R complex of the reptilian brain, and that then dictates. And that is pretty much, I think, where we are here in the Western environment. We're living in this reptilian kind of paradigm. And there's a lot about this. I was watching a documentary the other week with our favourite David Icke, and he was actually being challenged by an American conspiracy theorist actually called Jesse Ventura. Has anybody here heard of Jesse Ventura? Yeah. Real character. Yeah. He used to be a wrestler, and I think he was in the Marines or something, wasn't he, or something at one point. And he's trying. But the one thing I have to give him credit for, he has access to the halls of power because somehow he's also what would you call a minister in America?
A minister.
He's a minister.
But isn't he also a politician?
Yeah, he's a politician, that's right, yeah. So he has access to actually all the people that are making these decisions, and he just walks into the White House and knocks on their office door and directly confronts them. It's amazing. You know, whereas these guys are sitting there thinking, they've got these cameras and, you know, they go, trying to make some, justification in terms of their activities, but anyway, he's great. Anyway, he was really having a go at David Icke, really about this whole reptilian thing. And the way I see this is that, yes, there is a level to this which is true. I've actually seen myself on the inner journey, you could say, not in an outer physical world. I haven't seen a reptilian walking down the street or standing shape-shift in my living room or anything. but I have seen a reptilian on an inner journey once I took, and it was a she. And she was absolutely splendid, I have to say. I didn't feel any real fear I wasn't really intimidated by her or anything. And she had this beautiful translucent light and very nice sort of scaly colours. And she looked, for all intents and purposes, like a work of art. And I thought, God, she looks really nice. And this experience lasted just a few seconds, and then I was gone somewhere else. I don't know why I even had a look at that, but it was interesting. So I know these beings exist. They do exist in a parallel reality, the astral world, parallel with this physical reality. I've seen it, I know it. I mean, not just that, but many, many others as well. But they also exist here on Earth. The reptilian force is existent in each and every one of us, because we all operate off our reptilian brain. And this is our reptilian consciousness. And in a sense, inside of us, we are, at that level, nothing better than amphibious reptilian creatures operating off a survival mechanism. So this is this left brain. It can, and I've written a few things here. It can lead to rigid skepticism, and what I've also called scientism. Leads to atheism, solipsism, moral relativism. Okay, solipsism is basically where we say, actually, the way that I see reality is the way reality is. There is no absolute reality. Everyone has their own version of reality. Have we all heard of this philosophy? It's quite common, I think, in the New Age. That as we see reality, that is reality. And our perception is the truth. And everyone has their version of reality, therefore everyone has their version of the truth. Yeah, we've all heard this, haven't we? Okay, it's absolute, complete mumbo jumbo. It's rubbish, basically. That is not a reality. And how I know that's not a reality is that there are certain laws, called natural laws, that govern this reality, that no matter how we think our perception is, we cannot contravene those natural laws. Is that not true? Even if you're not aware of those laws operating, you're still defined by them. That's what I would call the boundary principles in reality. Light always travels in straight lines. Gravity always works. Right? We know these things. Yeah? Even a baby is subject to the law of gravity. Gravity's, it doesn't know anything, and yet gravity works. So these are fundamental natural laws that apply to each and every one of us. And really, in terms of where I was in the ashram, we would call these the absolute laws. Boundary conditions that define every living organism within this universe. Yeah? And that's why I know there is an absolute reality, there's an absolute truth that we all share. And we are part of that collective. Right? So therefore I know when I say, here's a whiteboard, that we can all perceive this as a whiteboard. Now it doesn't mean that perception can't vary, because perception does vary. But truth is truth. Reality is reality, and how we perceive it can be different. So your perception of the world and my perception, and Adrian's perception, can be vastly different. But the world is still the world. The world is still truth, you could say. And that our job as human beings is to align ourselves to that truth. Now, our perceptions are usually wildly off. Our perceptions are somewhere else completely most of the time. And we're completely misaligned with the truth or the reality of our existence here on planet Earth. Yeah? You could see it as truth as a straight line, perhaps. And our tendency to meet this straight line as a curve that goes above and below. Have you seen this, like a sine wave? Yeah? So when we're in a fearful consciousness, we have a very low or a very slow, elongated wave. So we very rarely, as it were, bisect that line of truth. Very rarely. Because of the length of this wave is so long. When we're in a heart consciousness and a high frequency, then we're bisecting that middle line, which is truth, very frequently. Can you see that? So our job really is to align ourselves to truth, because it's our perceptions that actually will erroneously perhaps take us off. Okay, and that's a process of heartfelt introspection that we all need to engage in. And this is a little bit what this group's really about, in a sense. But this is the left brain. It takes us into this idea of solipsism, which is this idea that actually I can define my own reality. And out of that then comes something called moral relativity. Moral relativity. Well, if I'm defining what reality is, then I can define what's right and wrong. And this is pretty much how things operate in the West, particularly with the hierarchies in terms of government, in terms of the lawmakers, in terms of corporations. I mean, I can see there's a lot of corporations out there. I mean, I don't want to name any names, but a lot of them are doing things which are grievously harmful to local populations and to the planet. Right? And yet in their mindset, like, if you're Jesse Ventura and you can go into their offices and confront them, they completely say, well, this is okay. This is actually the correct and the right way to be because we've justified it in this way. But if you look at the word justification actually is Latin. It actually literally means to make a wrong a right. To take a wrong and make it into a right. That's what justification means. Yeah. Not a lot of us know that, but that's exactly what it is. To make a wrong a right. So this is what we do when we're in extreme left brain schism. We tend to justify everything. We tend to move into something called moral relativism. And social Darwinism and eugenics is the outcome of that. Social Darwinism and eugenics. Social Darwinism says that basically there are certain people in society that are better than others. Yeah, right. This is what you might call a hierarchical system. Certain people have more power, they have more influence, they have more privilege than others, and they have a right to that. And there are others, like the rest of us, that actually have the right to just be told what to do, to be obedient and to be subservient to them. Yeah? In a way. This is what you would call an external sovereignty. That's what I call external sovereignty. And what we need to do is we need to internalize this principle of sovereignty. Sovereignty literally means without rulers. Yeah. Revolution. Yeah, go for it, yeah. Yeah. We're getting to politics soon. Yeah.
Just while you're having a break there.
Yeah.
The fact that we're operating predominantly from left brain, is that sort of a key characteristic of being in Kali Yuga? Has it been different in the previous ages?
It has.
So
Absolutely right, it has been different. Yeah. In the Satya Yuga, we were perfectly in harmony with nature. Yeah. This is the first age, it's called the Golden Age, for those that weren't here last week. When we're in harmony with nature, we are totally at one with the laws that govern this universe. There isn't a sine wave anymore. There's just a line. And we're on that line. Yeah, you see. Or we're just moving away from it just very, very gently. But this movement away actually increased and became less frequent as we moved into the next stage, Treta Yuga or the Silver Age. Actually, we have it here. Can everyone see this? It's the Golden Age here.
So that would mean, I think you've said this before, but it's more like telepathic communication.
Yep.
There weren't any secret societies.
No, there wasn't a need. There wasn't even a need for written language back then. Because we could communicate at that point using our psychic facility. We all have a psychic facility, but it's almost completely dormant right now, except in a few individuals that have cultivated it. Like Mary, you do psychic readings, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some individuals now that are starting to develop this more. But going back to the Satya Yuga, which takes us back to 11,500 BC when that started, so you're looking to go back about 13,500 years to the beginning of that time frame, up to about 6,700 BC when it ended. At that time we were fully psychic, fully awake. Our psychic centers were totally open. So the symptom of that is absolutely like superhuman. It's like superhuman. We can't imagine what it would be like to be walking around with completely wide open psychic centers. It's incredible. And we maybe experience this from time to time. I know, Adrian, you do a lot of drugs, don't you? So, so he experiences it every Saturday night. But for most of us, yeah. Without using any drugs or psychotropics or anything like that, because that's what they do, the psychotropic drugs, they work on these higher centers and they awaken us. And we start to use that psychic facility for a few hours, and it's like, people that have that experience, it's like it's mind-blowing. It's like, wow, there's a whole world within this world that I just didn't see. It's like you just pull away the veil, and it's just all light and geometry, and it's wonderful. Of course, you don't need to take drugs to see that. You know, it's like, it just helps. I personally wouldn't recommend it, because you can get all kinds of energy disturbances and disruptions, particularly to the Kundalini force, through the use of these drugs. So I think from time to time they can be useful. If someone's too locked into the left brain, or they're too rigid in terms of their worldview, then it can actually be a little bit of a sledgehammer, as it were, to break through that and to break into new paradigms. And I think a lot of people were on that bandwagon in the 60s. I mean, I was a baby, so I can't remember the 60s. But, you know, that was what it was about, I understand, was really breaking through that, you know, the construct of our everyday reality to what is behind that. Which is the modus operandi of this next age that we're moving into, the Dwapara age, which is the age of energy. The energy behind form. Yeah. I read a book some time ago that described the Kali Yuga. It's like, if you wanted to do something in the Kali Yuga, you had to get men and horses basically to do things. Manpower. But in this new age, the Dwapara Yuga, you've got one guy working at JCB. It's got all the energy coming from the hydraulic equipment that maybe 100 men would have to do with shovels and picks. And this is just the beginning of it. Where we're going to be going over the course of the next 2,400 years is just unimaginable what kind of energy technologies we'll have at that time. I mean,
Because we'll take whatever intelligence we've accumulated in that new age.
yes, we will. We'll take the mechanical age into the energy age. Yeah, and therefore we'll energize our mechanical machines. Yeah, starting with the steam locomotive, but ending probably in interstellar travel.
Is our key core raison d'etre throughout all these ages still to be creative and to just keep, you know, taking this expanding universe, if you like? Is that always the raison d'etre of whatever age we've incarnated in and whatever our abilities are at that time?
What do you mean, to become self-aware? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I suppose, yeah, or to just be this creative force that we all are.
Yeah, I believe that's basically what it is. I was going to get to creativity in a little while, because one of the things I really wanted to touch upon this time, which I haven't very much in the previous talks, is the heart. And particularly the tradition that I used to work within when I was a monk, which was the Bhakti tradition. So I want to get to that in a little while, because there are several paths that are prescribed, you might say, in the ancient scriptures. And each path is valid, and each path appeals to a certain type of human being. But they all accumulate eventually in loving devotion, which is considered to be the highest path or the ultimate path. But we'll get to that in a little while. But I need to go through the brain first. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
The idea really is a synthesis. It's coming back again. And we all do this cycle. If you notice, there's a downward trend and then an upward movement again. So there's a descending into darkness and a rising out of darkness into light. So we go through each of these time frames sequentially, and then we come out of them sequentially. We're right down here at the moment at the end of the Kali Yuga and the beginning of this Dwapara Yuga, this age of energy. Then that's followed by the age of mind and psychic awareness and ability. It's followed by the age of spirit, which is the golden age again. Yeah, I'm going to get into this in April. Where are we now? March, yeah, so next month. So this will be the first talk in April is going to be on time and consciousness. And then I'm going to do a second talk, which I mentioned to you, Ashley, which is going to be on the 7 rays. Now that's a big subject. So we're going to cover that in about 2 hours. And then we're going to get into the last talk, which is going to be the spiritual evolution of consciousness. What in theosophy they call anthropogeny. Which I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to hone down and codify these into just basically 3 talks. So there'll be a 4th one maybe to follow on from that, depending upon where we go with the first 3. But these are the talks I've got planned for April. So anyone that's interested to come along to that, make sure I've got your email address before you go. And I will email you about that. Okay, so how are we doing? Left brainism. Yeah. So this basically, this left brainism basically says the universe is random. Everything is chaos. There's nothing in control. I am God. Yeah, not me personally, but you know, I'd like to think so at times. But then we all sort of think, I am God. I am the creator of my own reality. I define what reality is. I can say what's right and wrong. Yeah? So this is this idea of the left brain and the left brain universe, which defaults to the R complex or our survival complex only. And this is where we are. I mean, this is the cage that really we're living in the West. We have the flip side of that, of course, which you can probably gather from my nice drawing here, or this illustration, is the feminine side. And this is, of course, the right brain. The right brain has much more to do with creative thought. It's much more to do with spatiality, tone, rhythm. Tends to think in things of curves and circles rather than straight lines. Yeah? So when we tend to be in our right brain, we tend to be in a, well, I would call a religious mindset, where we lose or we close down the critical discerning faculty of the left brain. So when we close down the discrimination of the discerning faculty of the left brain because we're dominantly right brain or predominantly right brain, then we tend to enter into a naivety, a gullibility. We tend to think of things quite simply, and we tend to believe what we're told. Yeah? Is that right, Mary? This is you to a T, isn't it? Yeah. So this is kind of like, well, basically what we have here is this, I have written it down here anyway, order followers, willing slaves, religious extremism, blind belief, naivety. Because we don't question authority, we don't question anything. That faculty to question, to analyse, to dissect, to discern, to discriminate is the left brain. So if our right brain is dominant, our left brain is shut down. So we lose the abilities, so we just go along with whatever we're told, like a willing slave. So whether we're in the left side or the right side, we're still in a way you might call, we're a puppet. We're really a puppet. Whether we're left or we're right, we are controlled. This side of us tells us basically that everything is controlled by higher forces. We just have to trust in the Lord, we have to trust in the Bible, we have to trust what we're told. Everything is defined by a higher principle and we have no choice in the matter. The other side, the left brain, basically says everything's random, everything's chaos, and it's down to us to choose what we do. They're the complete opposites, if you can see. Yeah? So when we're here in our right brain, we default to the limbic system. So if we're predominantly right brain, we tend to operate off the mammalian brain, the limbic brain, which is our emotional brain. Now, I've personally been involved over the years with one or two women in relationships that have been like this. And I've tended towards the left brain, and they've tended towards the right, and we haven't met anywhere in the middle. It's like, to me, this doesn't compute, this doesn't make any sense. And of course, from their perspective, it's like, oh no, this is my need, this is my feeling, this is my impulse, this is my emotion, this is my sense of things right now, and this is what's uppermost. Can you see? Because they've defaulted to the limbic brain, which is the emotional brain.
But you can see why there would be an attraction.
You could, because opposites attract. Yeah. And what we're really trying to do in the opposite attract business, which is all to do with relating and relationship, is really to balance ourselves. Isn't it? I mean, that's the hope, isn't it? Yeah. So we find, usually whether we like our partners or whether we don't like our partners or we're feeling different towards who we have as a partner or partners in the past, they are always the diametrical opposite reflection of the energy that we hold at that time. As a subconscious signal that goes out, that's a subconscious vibration, it goes out to the universe and then pulls in the opposite. And really they're a mirror really to us in terms of the aspects of us that perhaps need to be enhanced, that need to be accepted, embraced and developed. You know, much like a man would love a woman or a woman would love a man. So we need to embrace the opposite half on the outside just as well as on the inside. Actually, we really need to just do it on the inside, to be honest. And then we're kind of okay. Doing it on the outside and not doing the work on the inside is looking for happiness in the world without addressing the cause of our unhappiness, fundamentally. And that'll never work. That's a fraught path.
Short-lived.
Short-lived, yeah. It's a short fuse with a big bang, as my father used to say. There are successions of big bangs. But usually those relationships, they fall by the way and we move on and we think, oh, that person wasn't right for me. I need to find someone better that's more of a match. Yeah, and yet, we will still be broadcasting the energy that basically says this is my diametric opposite. So, we'll attract whatever is required really in terms of our energy rather than our ideal. Yeah. That's hard work. Yeah. But if we can be honest in the context of a relationship, we can get to this middle point, this middle ground. And that's the key. Because when we are balanced inside of ourselves, and our left and our right, and our masculine and our feminine, we are then aligned with our spiritual axis. And the spiritual axis really is literally, if you were to hold your finger like this, for each and every one, because we all have different bodily proportions, this would be an energy axis that would run from the crown through to the perineum, running all the way through us, slightly, as it were, just in front of the spine on the inside. There's the spiritual axis, really, that I often see that, I sort of see it that I am somehow positioned, because it extends above me and it extends below me, I am actually positioned on this axis. And I can move up, and I can move down, in a way. But while I'm here in physical body, I occupy this position on the axis. And at this position on the axis, there are 7 centers that are available to us, in terms of our consciousness, in terms of our awareness and our capacity to understand truth. So each of these centers will actually inform us at 7 different levels of consciousness. And this is I'm going to go more into this in the first talk in April, when we're going to talk about what's called the septenary nature of reality. There are 7 levels, or 7 dimensions to reality. Here we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sometimes they're numbered the other way around. So we start with the first plane as number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down here in the physical reality. So these are the 7 levels of the 7 dimensions with their Sanskrit and English terms here. So we're occupying this level of existence here. We're down here in the physical universe, right at the base here. There are another 6 dimensions or 6 levels above us. But we occupy each of these dimensions at the same time as we're here in physical reality. So there are aspects of us at each level that we're completely unaware of when we're incarnate here into the physical universe. So this is how reality is constructed, on 7. And each of these fields and each of these planes of consciousness is then mirrored, and we have talked about this extensively on the previous talk, so I'll come back to that in a little while. But I just want to emphasize this septenary nature of consciousness, that we have ostensibly 7 layers to our field, to our aura, each pertaining to one of the levels of reality or one of the planes of consciousness. Yeah? Are we familiar with that? Are we familiar with this? I mean, I know those guys that came along to the spiritual incarnation talk, we did cover this. Anyone needing me to quickly go through this here?
No, don't worry.
Mm.
You okay with it?
Yeah, I'll keep going with.
Yeah? What about anybody else? Are you okay? Yeah? You alright with that? Yeah. It looks complicated, but it's not. It's not.
The question I have is about Summerland.
The Summerland?
Yeah.
Oh, down here?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I should quickly just dash through this and then we'll get to that. Shall I just do a 5-minute quick recap?
Yes, please.
Mary, you'd like it, wouldn't
Yeah,
you?
I'd love it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
No one else minds.
Alright. Adi is a Sanskrit term. Adi means one, singular. Yeah? So Adi basically is where we all start. In Theosophy they call this the unmanifest. So this is God in an unmanifest state. In the universe they see, well, in creation, from a scriptural point of view, from the ancient world point of view, they see that there are times of activity in creation where the universe comes into being, and there are times of rest, assimilation and process, where there is perfect balance and stillness. So this, you might say, is the realm of perfect balance and stillness. What in Sanskrit is called the pralaya. Yeah? So out of the pralaya comes a movement or an impulse for God to know himself. Basically, what happens there is this field of nothingness, or this field of emptiness, becomes something. with that impulse, light is created. And these are known as the rays in ancient culture, in ancient philosophy. There's 7 rays which are dominant within our system, pertaining to each of the 7 levels, or the 7 planes, which are the 7 chakras, and the 7 levels to our aura. Can we see 7, 7, 7, 7? Always 7. Yeah? Yeah? So the first thing that happens is that God basically fragments into millions and billions and trillions of tiny little sparks, little pinpoints of energy, or little rays of light. And these are called the monads. And this is really, you might say, is our spirit self, the monad. Yeah? Our spirit spark. We reside at this level of consciousness, you might say, for millions and millions and millions of years. Millions of years, as a monad. And then we venture down in frequency, in energy, and in vibration. And we send an aspect of our consciousness down into the next level, which is the Atman. This is a term which is known in Sanskrit, Atma, or Atman. And this is really the will of God. This is the will. So this is the plan that we had here at this level, actually coming into manifestation, actually coming into shape. So at this level we are creating planets, galaxies, solar systems, on the big scale, you might say. Because we are still one with the divine, and we're using the power of will to manifest reality. That level. You could say this is the level of the hierarchy, or the hierarchies of consciousness in this universe. From there we extend a little bit further down. Another fragment of ourselves comes down into this Buddhic or intuitional plane. So we have one extension down here from the monadic, and then from there another extension. So from the Buddhic plane we have the, you might say, our love, our feeling for compassion, the feeling of connection to the all, the oneness of reality. This is like a Buddhic or an intuitional sense of things, that we're all connected, we're all ultimately one. And then from there, there's another little thread that extends itself down one more time to the upper level of this plane. Now you might notice that these planes are all singular, but this is the first level here that's actually in 2 halves. So we extend from here into the upper half only. Not into the lower half, only into the upper half. And this is what's called the causal plane. And this is the higher mental consciousness. This is the what you might call abstract thought. Yeah? And that completes the upper triad. So we have 1, 2, 3 steps. Yeah? So this is will, this you might say is feeling, and this is abstract thought. And this comprises what in Christianity we would call the soul. And we remain then working at these levels of higher consciousness, you might say, within the universal scheme for maybe millions and millions of years before we decide to venture in towards physical reality. And then when we do that, we extend ourselves one more time to this level, which is the lower mental consciousness, which you could say is concrete thought, like what I'm using now, ideas and beliefs. From there we go down into the astral world, which is the world of impulses and emotions and samskars. And then from there we eventually extend one level down into matter. And this completes the lower triad. So we've gone 1, 2, 3. So we have a principle of 3 and a principle of 3. And this together forms the Star of David.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have the lower triad which points up and the upper triad which is pointing down, and they come together. But for most of us these are completely separate. There is a small bridge that connects the lower triad with the upper triad at this point. And that's called the Antakarana, or the Rainbow Bridge. Have we all heard of this? Okay, well there's a bridge that connects, and that is all that we're doing with this work here in human consciousness, is we're making the connection between our lower and our higher consciousness. And just in a nutshell, because this is a whole talk that I did on death, but what happens is we go through our earthly experience, our earthly life, And the experiences that we gain here that are mirroring our higher consciousness are then passed or infused into our higher consciousness through this rainbow bridge, through the Antakarana. So we gain wisdom, knowledge through experience in that way. And that's really what we're looking for here in physical incarnation. We're looking really to taste our true nature. We're looking to discover through direct perception and experience our true self. And that's all that this is about. Those experiences which align to that are registered on the higher consciousness. And it's as if we actually grow. We are eternally spiritual, we are eternally the same, but our consciousness expands as to our awareness of that which we already are. This is great, isn't it? So this is the lower triad, which you might say is the information gathering triad, which is then handed up to the higher triad in terms of, you might say, the assimilation processing triad, which makes sense of it, which goes, aha, I see myself. This makes sense. This is who I am. And that's done through this system of 7 again.
So what is Summerland?
Summerland, yes. So the Summerland really is the upper half of the astral plane. So each of the 3 lower planes, you've noticed, are all divided into roughly 2.
Mm-hmm.
But each of these planes here actually has a subdivision of 7 as well. So you can see they're slightly disproportionate because we have 4 divisions here and 3 divisions here. And we have 3 here and 4 here. So when we die, it's this part of us, the physical reality, separates from the astral reality. Can you remember the masculine and feminine? Have I got that here? Page 1 there. I'll just get this one here. There are always 2 aspects to manifestation, to life and consciousness, the masculine and the feminine. Masculine is to do with what I was describing at the beginning, metaphysical understanding. It's to do with consciousness. In Sanskrit they call this Shiva. Feminine is to do with energy and matter. In Sanskrit they call this Shakti. So we are all Shiva and Shakti. We are all consciousness and everything else that's in the universe, you can say. Yeah? So consciousness is infinitesimally small. It's like a singularity, as science would put it. But energy and matter, Shakti, is infinitely large. Can you see? They are both aspects of our Adi, divine nature, our monad. So our monadic nature basically goes on 2 separate journeys. One of consciousness, which is descending, and one of energy and matter, which is rising. And they meet, or they come together in this human physical form. That's where the consciousness that's falling and energy and matter come together, and we have a human being. Yeah? I've drawn it here. You can see this is happening at the level of the 3rd dimension, physical reality. There's the masculine consciousness coming down, the feminine consciousness going up. And here we are at the 3rd dimension, this physical reality. Yeah? So coming back to what happens at the time of death in the Summerland, is that the masculine consciousness separates from the feminine consciousness. In other words, our astral mechanism separates from the etheric physical, energy and matter. So energy and matter fall away and they die. That's the corpse, the body that we leave behind. And the astral continues on. That's another body that we have. That eventually will die. And then we have another body which is mental that will eventually die. So we undergo 3 deaths. And this is definitely going to have to be a talk. I'm going to have to do it again, because I'm going through this very quickly here. But at each of these levels we experience a death. First physically, then emotionally, then mentally. And then we come back to this point in our journey. After this life, after death, we journey back home, as it were. Yeah? From this point we then design a new life, a new incarnation, and then we extend ourselves down again into physical matter. And we're born again, and here we are. Yeah? This level here is the Summerland, which really is a place, you might say, of rest and recuperation. Because most of the hard work has been done down here in what's called hell purgatory. Yeah? So we've gone through the 4 lower subdivisions of the astral plane, cleaning and purging heavy elements out of our psyche, heavy samskaras.
So it's like being on holiday then.
There is still work that goes on here, but it's at a finer level. It's more refined. Generally speaking, each of these planes is considered to be broken into 2, one gross and one subtle or fine. So when we're getting to this level, or the higher planes of the astral, it's more fine impulses, fine, subtle samskaras.
Okay.
It's more our refined and finer nature that we're really with, rather than the heavy, denser elements which we're having to deal with here in the lower astral.
Okay.
We have to deal with them first.
Yep.
But once we've dealt with them and we've purged or expunged our consciousness of those elements, then we rise up. Remember, like a cork can rise up to the next level, and vibrationally it can then reside here. And this feels like it's, well, it's heavenly. It feels like it's heavenly. We go even higher. This is true heaven, by the way, Devasham. This is true heaven as is described in the Bible. This is not heaven, because we're still working on our impulses, be they more refined. But once we've actually cleared ourselves of all these impulses, then we actually go to Devasham, which is considered to be true heaven, where we're in a state of blissful consciousness. Yeah? Okay, let's
Thank you.
come back here. I'll leave that there for now. All right, so once we come into a balance between the left and the right, coming back to where we were before, just come back, yeah. We then are in an enlightened position, really, where we are situated on our axis. In other words, we have the ability then to be spiritually incarnate. In other words, we have the capacity to be in communion with this and with this. Anything else is a polarized state and will take us lateral. Whether we're left brain survival or we're right brain emotional. We're going lateral, and that will fuel, if we're in a left brain or right brain consciousness, the egoic consciousness, the egoic self, the egoic identity. And humans will roughly fall into one of these 2 camps. Left, masculine, right, feminine. And often does correspond to our actual physical gender. Men tend to be more left brain, women tend to be more right. Yeah, but not for everybody. It's a general rule. But we will fall into one or the other, and we will cycle through one and the other in different incarnations until we eventually come to a point of balance. Yeah, what we experience at one extreme is balanced by a lifetime in the other extreme. Can you see that? The ancients would call this karma. Everything has to come to balance, and really karma is really a law that you could say is the law of balance. That's all it seeks to do. It's not punishing anyone, it's not trying to, cause any harm or injuries. It's often seen as being a malefic force within the universe that causes us pain and suffering. It's not that. It's actually just trying to bring things into a harmony and a balance inside of us. Yeah? So as soon as we do that, then we're able to actually then access our true center and our true knowing. And then we can bring in the resources from spirit. And we can bring in the abilities and talents that we have at the higher levels of consciousness into physical reality. And because we are immense in terms of that higher consciousness, the consciousness of our soul. Yeah? On the manasic, on the buddhic, and the atmic planes, that higher triad. So the idea really with this work is not to get out and to escape from where we are here in terms of physical reality, but is to bring us in to physical reality so that we're completely here. And this is completely the opposite to how a lot of even people in India, I have to say, think. Because their whole idea is an idea which is centered around what's called mukti in the East. And the idea of mukti really is liberation. And liberation basically means that we're free of the shackles and the bonds of physical reality. But what I'm saying here is the opposite is actually true. What we really need to do is we need to get more in to physical reality and to be more here in our physical bodies and to bring more of our talents, abilities and resources into this physical universe. And only then are we truly free, even while in the flesh. You look at someone like Jesus, you think about that from the Bible, or you think about Buddha or Muhammad or Krishna or whatever, you can see these, you might say, are highly elevated or enlightened beings. And it wasn't because of their tendency to not be here and escape that they were considered enlightened. They were very much present, they were very much here, but they were enlightened because they had more resources and more capability and more capacity than ordinary human beings. Because all of them was here, present, physically, incarnate into this world. And this is really what we're seeking to do. And I often cringe sometimes at some of the stuff that goes on in the name of, in the name of spirituality, but also in the name of healing. I have to say, this is just a little bit of, I've got to be in my bonnet about this, so I'm going to have to get this out. But
Bring it on.
Yeah, okay. Because we will tend to think of the shadow aspect as something as being negative, because it causes us hurt, it causes us pain, so we need to heal it and get rid of it. And I often hear this from clients, oh, just get rid of it. You know. I think, well, get rid of what? You know, this thing that's causing me harm, that's causing me pain. The thing about that is that really that is the mirror to the soul. That is the very thing that actually is the catalyst for growth. If we get rid of it, we've sabotaged growth. Can we say? We don't need to get rid of anything. We don't need to clear anything in that sense. We just need to use it for what it is designed to be used for. So the shadow is only there really to mirror back to us when we're going off this line of truth, you might say. This middle line, and we've moved so far away into our left or into our right field and we're away from it. It's there to go, actually, come back. Yeah, come back to what's true. When we do that, you know, either left or right, and we come to the center again, then we are healed. But it's not through manipulating our energy or getting somebody else to do that for us that we will be healed, because that will sabotage our journey to some degree or another. Not that you can do it completely, thankfully, because most of it doesn't work or doesn't stick for very long. And before we know it, we're experiencing the same hurts, the same problems all over again. Yeah? Isn't it? You know, we try and think, oh, I'm going to fix, I'm going to repair, I'm going to make it right for me, and yet we do that, and yet a week down the line, a month down the line, a year down the line, the same issues are confronting us all over again, if not even more powerfully. Is it true? So when it comes to healing, two things have to come into play at the same time. And we do tend to find that also in the world of healing that it's polarized. It's either left brain or right brain. So either we have the healers that are actually just in their left brain and they're only dealing with consciousness, and they're closed down in their right brain, so they don't want to deal with the feminine side, which is energy and matter. Or we have healers that only want to manipulate energy and matter and not illuminate anything. You see? I see this all the time. And what really needs to happen is consciousness and energy work need to come together simultaneously. So we need to be aware of what it is, we need to face what we need to see, we need to be honest and see it for what it really is, and then undergo the alchemical processes of change that are associated with actually just facing, seeing, owning and forgiving, perhaps, what it is that we see inside of us. And then we can really truly shift energetically. Whatever it is we're holding in our field of energy will be cleared. It will be healed. Because we're connected then back to our spiritual center by bringing the masculine and feminine, the left and the right sides together and finding that midpoint. That's where real healing takes place. That's my theory, that's my idea, so take it with a pinch of salt and see how that fits. But yeah, I think real healing really is always a combination of Shiva and Shakti, left and right, masculine and feminine, has to be together. Okay, so, having defined all of this, I'm going to go back now through ancient time. Actually, how are we doing? I don't want to run out of time today for the practices, because this is really a practice session that we're doing here. Although it usually ends up with me just talking. Okay, so I want to be clear today, we are going to do some practice, not like last time. Yes, So I'm going to come back to the ancients and the ancient wisdom. Now, as I've already pointed out previously in this talk, as we go back through time, we're actually going back into previous seasons or previous yugas, as the ancients called it, when human consciousness was much more expanded and much more awake than it is now. So the further back we go through time, in a way, the further back we go to a more enlightened consciousness, an enlightened state. So this is really what the Indians were really portraying. They were teaching this through their information in the Vedas. Who hasn't heard of the Vedas? You've heard of the Vedas, yeah? Have you heard of the Vedas? No. And Mary, you have, haven't you? Yeah. Okay, the Vedas basically is a teaching that was laid down, they say roughly about 5,000 years ago. There was a part of an oral tradition that went back many, many thousands of years, but eventually was codified, actually written down in Sanskrit. And this was written down by one individual, actually, and his disciples. And this individual is known as Dvaipayana Vedavyas. Dvaipayana means island-born, and Vedavyas means the repository, you might say, of all knowledge. So this guy actually was born on an island in the middle of a river, but he became one of India's greatest, you could say, scholars or teachers. And he took all of what was actually there in the way of the oral tradition up until that point in time, and he wrote it all down. It was a monumental work, monumental task. It comprised information on every aspect of life. Every aspect of life. And what he wanted to do really in his endeavour was to have a path or a solution, you might say, for every human being. No matter what their nature was, no matter what their consciousness was, no matter what their social position was, there would be something in the Vedas which would appeal to them. They could go, aha, this looks like there's something in it for me. And they could then engage in a process of enlightenment by following their natural inclinations and tendencies, of which everyone is different. So you can imagine the Vedas as a voluminous, enormous body of knowledge, because it has to describe so many different states of consciousness to appeal to so many different types of individual. But this is exactly what he did. And he spent, I think, decades and decades and decades, along with his disciples, compiling this Vedic knowledge from the ancient wisdom. Finally, one day, the task was done. The task was finished. And he thought, wow. Yeah. No matter who is going to approach this body of knowledge, there's going to be something for them in here. Something attractive for every human being, no matter where they are, that they can then advance from that position forward. So the idea was that he would draw them in and say, actually, there's some benefit if you look at this. And then there was a prescribed path from that point, which would then advance their consciousness. So everybody then would have a prescribed set of tools that they could look up in the Vedas to advance themselves. So you could imagine at the end of this, it was a very monumental task. He was very, very happy. But unfortunately, the happiness didn't last very long. And within a short period of time, he became very depressed, actually. He became very sad. And he couldn't understand. He couldn't understand why it was that he wasn't feeling blissful. So he was sitting there reflecting upon his state because he'd just finished his life's work. And he was thinking, God, I should be in a state of ecstatic bliss. And yet I'm not. I'm in a state of, I'm sad, I'm depressed. What's going on? I finished this monumental task and here I am. My heart is empty. I don't feel full. And at that time his teacher appeared. Now his teacher was you might call an eternal being within this universe called Narada Muni. Narada Muni was one of the first created beings, supposedly within this universe, according to the Indian tradition. So if you read back through their mythology to their creation stories, Narada Muni was one of the first beings that appeared out of Brahma, which was the first created being. He was one of the sons of Brahma. So right at the very beginning of this universal creation, Narada was there. And Narada, fortuitously, was the teacher or what they call the guru in Sanskrit, of Vedavyas. So Vedavyas was sitting there completely morose, completely depressed, getting into a right pickle, and suddenly Narada appears out of the sky and descends from on high and says, what is going on? You know, you've done this incredible task. You know, you've actually tabulated and you've actually codified all these different prescriptions and paths for all the living beings for all time. Surely you should be relieved and surely you should be joyous at the completion of this task. And Vedavyas says, yeah, you know, but I am in a way, but something's missing and I don't know what it is. And it's that that upsets me, and it's that that makes me most depressed. But because I don't know what it is, I can't come out of this depressive state. So Narada said, well, let me enlighten you. What you've missed is the topic really which is talking about the devotion of the heart. It's the topic which describes love. So what he'd done basically is he'd actually defined all these various paths which you might say are much more akin to our mental consciousness, to an understanding of what needs to be done. Various techniques, various processes, various methodologies, various rituals, ceremonies, all these things. What you would call in Sanskrit dharma, or the prescribed rules and regulations that govern life here on earth. But he actually had forgotten to describe the heart. And that's what was missing. So Narada said he had to then actually rewrite or write a treatise which was to do with opening and widening the heart center and the heart consciousness. And these are known as the Puranas. They came after the Vedas. They're recent in terms of Indian history, more recent. And these are only stories. They're only stories. They don't get too much into philosophy. They don't get too much into dharma or prescriptions or techniques or tools. They're just stories. And they're in various volumes, huge volumes, I have to say. I've read some of these several times. Who's heard of the Mahabharata? Ashley. Who hasn't heard of the Mahabharata? Okay. Maha means great, Bharata means India. So this is the great story of India. And it really describes the story of loving devotion. Loving devotion. Talks about a lot of things, but really accumulates in the latter half of the Mahabharata in one chapter, which in itself is a book, which we were talking about earlier, John. And there's one chapter taken out of the Mahabharata, which is just one chapter, in itself is 18 chapters. This is called the Bhagavad Gita. Who's heard of the Bhagavad Gita? Everybody, right? Yeah. Like the Hindu Bible. So this Bhagavad Gita is one chapter out of the Mahabharata, which is a Purana, which is to do with really the nature of loving devotional consciousness, or what the ancients call bhakti, or bhakti consciousness. Now in India there are various paths. Vedavyas defined various paths back to source, or back home. I've written them down here, and you can see these paths here. They're also delineated in this book, the Bhagavad Gita. Has anyone here read the Bhagavad Gita? Ashley, John, you have, haven't you? Yes. Long time ago. Okay. It is an amazing book. It's incredible. I actually read it this afternoon. It was an abridged version. It wasn't the 2-volume. I actually read the abridged version of it this afternoon. It was amazing. It was just like a summary. It was just like, wow, this is incredible. It's like lights on. It touches the heart. In fact, all the stories really of the Bhagavad Purana just touch the heart. They melt the heart. And to be honest, I don't get into much of this. I haven't got into much of this for years. I just got back into doing this because I was doing these talks. Because my main thing for the last 20 years or so has really been stories. And that's it. And mostly I've just been looking at stories. And just feeling the bliss. And feeling the ecstasy. And feeling the love that comes through from these stories. They are so incredibly powerful. So powerful. I really recommend, if anybody wants to know, they can ask me after the talk what I would recommend in terms of literature, but I'd really recommend this literature in terms of the Mahabharata particularly, and the stories that come out of that. You'll be amazed at how it changes and opens your heart. And in that heartfelt opening, we are in our center. Our two brains are married and united. You see, because we have the left brain, which is studying language and form and understanding what is being taught from the book, and we have the right brain, which is going along with the theme and the story and the emotion and the battles of the characters. Can you see? And these two halves come together in the context of a story. And that was missing really from the original Vedas. This is a depiction here of Veda Vyas. The Vedas basically are broken down into four, which is the Rig, Sama, Atharva and Yajur. But really they accumulate in what is known as the Bhagavad Purana, which are these stories. So everything in terms of our journey through life, everything in terms of our direction through life, eventually always comes back to the heart. Always. Always comes back to Bhakti. So in the tradition that I was studying in, when I was a young guy, we were doing Bhakti and nothing else. Because in the temple we were taught, there's no point. Why do anything else? If you can be centered in your heart, and you can be with that heart energy as much as possible, then you'll know everything, you'll understand everything, and you'll become enlightened and cleaned and clear as fast as possible. This is the fast track. This is the shortcut, is the heart energy. And I always look upon it as the engine. It's the engine behind even our daily consciousness. Because it's our devotion, it's our love, it's our passion, you might say it's the fire in our heart which motivates us on a daily basis or not. And this is where Vyasadeva was. He wasn't feeling excited because that fire, as it were, that Bhakti wasn't in the Vedas. He was yet to describe it. And therefore his fire had gone out. And a symptom of someone's fire that's gone out is they feel depressed. They're not motivated in life. They're not animated. They're not, as we would say in the temple, fired up. Literally. That engine isn't running. So there are levels and there are degrees, you might say, in terms of this energy of bhakti or love energy. And this is dependent upon our vision for our life. The vision we have for our life will motivate us in terms of this heart energy to one degree or another. This vision is called the Ishta. In Sanskrit it's called the Ishta. It's basically what we hold to be our goal or our vision for our life right now. And our Ishta may be very vague, it may be very unclear, it may be very nebulous, or it can be really defined, or anything in between. But the idea is that we all need to find our Ishta, which is our devotional vision, which is our quest, which is the thing that fires our engine in daily life, which is the thing that gets us on our meditation stool, which is the thing that actually gets us doing the breath work, which is the thing that motivates us and keeps us in the fire of daily practice. Because if we don't have that, we'll run out of steam, or we won't even get started. Or we'll start and we'll splutter, and then we'll just forget about it. Can you see? I mean, how many people here, I mean, including myself, I have to say when I ask this question, have started something and not gone very far with it, and it's like you've run out of energy along the way? Can anybody say that that's happened to them at some point? Many times, right? Right. See, in the Indian Vedic system, it would be said that's because the Ishta was not so clearly defined. And therefore our engine was not so powerful in terms of motivating us into following that practice. So usually if we're not practicing, or our practice wanes, or we feel disinclined to practice spiritual stuff, it's because we haven't defined the Ishta, our devotional vision, our devotional goal to start with. It's like a car without an engine.
Because I suppose that's kind of like a discipline in itself, isn't it?
It is, because there are levels to it, as I said.
Mm.
So we'll find, at some point that this is what animates us, this is what fires us, this is my vision of my life and my goal and my passion. And you'll go, actually, no, it's not. I'm bored with it now. And then we all enter into that phase, don't we, where we're kind of in the doldrums, it's like, well, what am I doing? Where am I going with my life? What's next? And that can go on sometimes Well, I think a little too long. I've experienced, I don't know about you guys, but for me it can go on sometimes, it feels like for months before I go, okay, I'm getting a sense of what it might be and what's crystallizing, and then moving forward again with something new. And that just takes us to another level, to another level, to another level, to another level. And we're going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper towards our own heart in that journey. And ultimately our Ishta is one of pure, divine, unconditional love. That is the ultimate vision and objective for every human being. But we'll translate that at many levels, moving out from that core central theme in many ways. Like, my devotional love is, I'm doing tarot. My devotional love is I'm doing hypnotherapy. This is my devotional thing is I'm going to sit for 10 minutes every day and meditate. Don't care what happens the rest of my day. That's my Ishta, that's my goal, that's my devotional passion. Can you see? Yeah? That's Bhakti in a way. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti really is the last prescription. The last of the prescriptions. How much time? About 10 minutes. Okay, get through the other two, because there are two steps that get us to Bhakti. The first step that's described in the Bhagavad Gita is what's written here, Karma Yoga, selfless action. So, does everybody here know the context of the Gita? Yeah? No, not everyone knows the context of the Gita. The Bhagavad Gita was a spoken conversation. It took about 90 minutes, an hour and a half, for one warrior called Krishna speaking to another warrior called Arjuna. And they had a conversation on a chariot which was poised on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, between two huge armies that had already sounded they blow on these conch shells to sound the beginning or the commencement of the great battle. So the battle had already officially begun. And yet the armies had not advanced forward because there was one chariot that was actually right in the middle, standing still. And no one dare move until that chariot had actually left and taken its position in the ranks of what's called the Pandava army. Because on that chariot stood Krishna with Arjuna. And Krishna, he spoke the Bhagavad Gita. Because Arjuna, he became despondent and he didn't want to fight. Right? And one of the first things that was explained there was that we all have to act. We are in the physical universe, and action is synonymous with life here in this realm. Even if we're only acting in our mental consciousness, we're still acting. But the key is to act with detachment from result. To act with no regard for the outcome. To act, in other words, for the sake of acting. Because it's your natural, heartfelt, ishta, passion to do so. And not be worried about the fruit of that action. So this is called fruitless action, or karma yoga in Sanskrit. And this is a path back to God, which we can all do every single day and every moment of our life. Is that we follow our passion, we follow our heart, we follow our ishta the best we can, and then we just disconnect from the result. As soon as we get into results-based consciousness, we'll go either into a left brain or a right brain. We'll be feeding either into this side of us or that side of us. Either into our survival side or our emotional side. Can you see it? As soon as we start thinking results, it's either survival, I'm going to be more comfortable, I'm going to have more money, or it's emotional. I'm going to feel more secure, I'm going to feel more supported, I'm going to feel okay. Can you see? Either side of that, and we're accumulating karma. Because we have to balance. Because we're on the other side. But as soon as we can start to engage in work and disregard the result, then we are free of karma, and not only that, we are burning karma from the past. And this happens all the time because we all want to be incredibly successful, right? I mean, we all want to be happy, successful, flourishing people. And yet, there's times when I experience myself, well, there's no clients this week. Or someone doesn't like me. Or my girlfriend's a bit fed up with me because I've been a bit of a nutter. which was last week. You know, so I'm trying, I'm working, I'm endeavouring, but I'm not getting the result that I want always. And to be honest, my life, I have to say, I usually never get the result that I want. It's a bit of a sad life, really. I usually get something unexpected, or not quite, or nothing at all. So it's usually I'm very frustrated. It's like, when is it just going to work out right? When am I going to get what my dreams are and what I want? And I have to say it's been a journey of discovery. But through all of that, I've had to go back to this. Karma yoga. It's not about getting what I want. It's not about being in my left brain or my right brain, feeling safe and secure or emotionally okay. It's not about any of that. It's actually just about my own passion, my own fire, my own ishtar, my own devotion, and my natural need to get that and to express it out into the world, regardless of the results. Regardless. And if I'm doing that, then I'm in karma yoga. And I'm actually becoming liberated and free through that process, because I'm not bound to the left side or the right side of my consciousness. Not in a masculine or feminine mode of being. So I'm not operating then off an egoic stance. Can you see? Yeah, interesting, yeah? Okay, the next level, up from that, yes?
Well, I think it's important to just assert that yoga means union.
Union, yeah.
Yeah,
It means to yoke, it means union. Yeah. Are we aware of that? Yoga is not just the physical exercises. In the West, we tend to associate the word yoga with an aspect of yoga, which is just the physical yoga. But yoga is a Sanskrit term that literally means to link or to yoke, which is this connection down here with this connection up here that I was describing earlier. The personality with the soul. That's yoga. The ancients saw this as an eightfold process. We won't get into that today, because I haven't got the picture up here. No. But we have gone through this before, of which Hatha Yoga, the physical postures, is only 1/8 of the entire process. 1/8. That's like 16-17% only. So it's a very minor aspect. So we don't have to be bending ourselves into prestal, contorted shapes. It's not that important when we take in the whole of the yogic scheme. All 8 steps is what's important. And what we're doing here, and what I'm teaching here, is an integrated approach. We do all 8 steps at once, rather than just focusing on one thing, which is physical postures and seats, which is how we see it in the West. And I think personally that aspect of yoga has become hijacked by the health and fitness industry to a large extent. And it's not really what real yoga is about. It's part of it, but it's not the whole of it, that's for sure, if you understand. Yeah. Let's come back to the second process as expounded in the Bhagavad Gita here, which is the Jnana Yoga. I know that's spelt a little funny, should be with a G, but for some reason it's always spelt with a J. But it's pronounced Jnana. Jnana Yoga basically is the yoga of negation. It uses the intellect and uses the rationale to basically define what is not true. It involves a process called neti in Sanskrit. So it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. So if you eliminate everything that is not truth and not you and not from spirit, then you're left essentially with your essential self, spiritual self. Can you see? So the Jnana Yogis are very scholarly, they're very academic, they're using their intellect and rationale to discern all the time to arrive at the truth of who they are. And they're also very, very, very renounced individuals. These tend to be the yogis that we tend to think of when we think of a yogi that's renounced the world, that's giving everything away. Because they're not wanting to engage in anything that is not of truth, that is not from higher consciousness and self. So they renounce that. And you see a lot of these guys in India, they're usually sitting just with a loincloth or sitting by the Ganges or the Jamuna, or they're sitting there with a little begging bowl or something. Can you see them there? They've actually renounced everything. They've even renounced food in some respects, in terms of I don't even know where my daily food is going to come. They renounce money. And all worldly possessions, as I say, including clothes, some of them, don't even have a loincloth, some of them, they're just completely naked. And they cover themselves sometimes in ash and these various ways. They renounce everything. So this is a Jnana Yogi. Many of them study the scriptures. Many of them study intensely. Many of them are constantly sharpening their intellect, their rationale, their capacity to discern truth from falsity. So they tend to be quite powerful people. And they practice asceticism. But, I have to say but, that is more journey, if you understand, of the mind. This is my understanding of this. It's more a mental process, this, in terms of using the mind like a sword all the time, rather than the actual expansion of the heart. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna recommends to Arjuna not to practice that. He recommends to come to the platform of devotion.
Would that be yielding back to the left brain?
Yeah, more to the left brain. Yeah. So he says basically come to the devotion, come to love. So this is one step up from the karmic and karma yoga, and it's one step up from jnana yoga. Why? Because you are renouncing the world. Why? Because you're not attached to the fruits of anything. That's a renunciation, right? Can you see? You're giving up the fruits. That's what you do when you renounce. But Bhakti Yoga says, don't just give up and give up and give up and give up, because you'll end up with nothing. What you want to do is fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up with what is true, what is real, which is love and devotion. So do everything in a devotional way, in the mood of renunciation, with true awareness, discrimination and knowledge. So you're combining the path of karmic yoga and jnana yoga to arrive at Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of the heart. Okay, shall I just go through that one more time? You look puzzled?
No, I'm just...
Oh, okay, you're musing, yeah. Okay. Can everyone understand that?
I guess wondering which one of the Vedas it would be described in. You know,
Well, these ones, the Rig Samartava.
Yeah.
It's not really in any of those.
No.
This is really from the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
Well, at least that's I haven't read these Vedas, because I've only really studied this, which is the Bhagavad Purana.
I read the Rig Veda, but it was in Sanskrit.
It's in Sanskrit, yeah. I have it in audio form. But it's just, the Rig Veda really is the oldest of the Vedas. It goes all the way back to the Treta Yuga. Yeah, it's the first Veda that was written down. And really it's just a sequence of prayers to Indra, the god of heaven. Yeah, because at that time they saw Indra as being the god. At that time. Now, later that was changed. And Indra got very upset. But that's another story for another day.
So the descriptions of yoga, of those yogas, are in the Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the different margas. The three margas. Margas is path. So these are the three paths. Some have actually put a fourth path in there, which is the path of hatha, or the physical postures in yoga. I didn't include that, but some include that. Yeah, that's not really discussed. The physical postures and that side of things isn't really discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna doesn't recommend to Arjuna that you do certain postures, for example.
I was told that there was something called Raja Yoga.
Yeah, Raja Yoga, yeah, that's the king of yoga. That's come out of Paramahamsa Yogananda's school, which is also based on the Bhagavad Gita and the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, Raja Yoga really is, some say it's higher than Bhakti even.
Oh, okay. I think that was Maharishi's point of view.
Is it?
I think so.
Yeah.
That Bhakti was right up there, but
Oh, at the top.
Raja Yoga was even
Yeah.
the royal one.
Yeah. Yeah. The Raja literally means king or emperor. So this is the king yoga or the emperor yoga. But really, if you're looking at Raja Yoga, it's an integrational synthesis of all the other yogas together that comprise that one yoga.
Yeah.
Of which the main principle within that is Bhakti. I mean, Paramahamsa Yogananda was someone that really stood for Bhakti, I believe. And a lot of these incredibly loving beings, incredibly compassionate beings like the Buddha, for example, very much in their heart, very much with that love energy. Bhakti was their modus operandi, not just a study or a theme or something they were looking into. It was their being was bhakti, love and devotion. Yeah. So, yeah. So that was a quick run through, really, of the three margas, or the three paths, which are outlined really in the Bhagavad Gita, and how bhakti really, or the loving devotion, brings the previous two together. Previous two, working in a renounced way, and also knowledge and understanding and discernment and discrimination come together in bhakti.